so next thing we're going to look at is you know how we had all those leptons, quarks and force formats, and I said don't worry about them for now.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's time to worry. Okay, so these formats come from the nutrition course, and so a long time ago when I started writing all the nutrition stuff, what happened is that with the nutrition stuff, I did all this work with minerals and elements because there was a few indicator points, say for some of the basic ones like magnesium and calcium and sodium and potassium, that a lot didn't have, like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, which are very important in biochemistry. So I did all this stuff, but then I was looking at, you know, all of these individual elements, they're like atoms, but they're actually made up of subatomic particles. So I got interested in that, and I did formats for them. Then when I related it back to the chakra work, and we're looking at, you know, if you remember on the first day when I spoke about the planes and the monadic plane, and how energy forms mass, E equals mc squared. And so what happens is that when the energy is formed, and this is the monadic plane from duality, all the subatomic particles are formed. And then once all the subatomic particles are formed, the forces are formed which go between the particles, and that is the atomic plane. So the monadic plane is about the subatomic particles, and the atomic plane is about the forces. So let's have a quick look at them. So this is an atom. Basically an atom is made up of neutrons and protons that make up the nucleus, and electrons that spin around. And another picture, neutrons and protons. So electrons are actually subatomic particles, but neutrons and protons are not. They are actually made up of particles. They have smaller units which are called quarks. Now, these are real names, and this is what physicists give them. And so neutrons and protons are actually what's called a baryon, and a baryon is made up of 3 quarks. So if you look at this, you can see, well, first I'll show you this picture. This picture. Oh, this one's better. These are the names of all the quarks. You've got up, down, charm, strange, top and bottom. Okay, now you can tell they were nerdy physicists that came up with those names, right? But they're real. Now, up and down are the ones that are stable. So, and you can see this number here is their charge. Like these have a charge of plus 2/3, and these ones have a charge of minus 1/3. So if you've got 1 up and 2 downs, it's going to have a neutral charge. And if you've got 2 ups and 1 down, it's actually going to have a charge of plus 1. Okay? So if you can see here, 2 ups and a down, that's a plus 1, so that's a proton. 2 downs and an up, that's a neutral charge, that's a neutron. And then the electrons have a minus 1 charge, so basically they spin around with the electromagnetic force. So the other forces that are important here, the forces that hold the neutrons and protons together in the nucleus is called the weak force, and the force that holds the quarks together in the proton and the neutron, which are baryons, that's called the strong force. And so you have 3 forces here holding atoms together. Now the electron is an electon here, And there's actually 6 leptons. Some of them are neutrinos. These down here are neutrinos. They are so small, a neutrino can come through and pass right through the Earth without touching anything. Believe it or not. And then we have antimatter. So they all have antiparticles, and that is, you know, the electron is a plus, an electron with a plus charge. It's called a positron. And so all of these, this is a muon, tauon, and these are the neutrinos. So they're all got the opposite charge to the above. Okay, that's called antimatter. So there's actually 12 subatomic particles. A lot of them, well, we don't, you know, like I developed all these so we could have the electron format because we needed that in the biochemistry because electrons are really important in our biochemistry and covalent bonding and all this kind of thing in the atomic structure. And also with the quarks, just the same, you've got 6 quarks and you've got anti-quarks, so that's 12 quarks, but in our nutritional formatting, we only need 2, the up and down, because they're the only ones we're actually used in our body. The other ones are not very stable. But when we're talking about chakras in the monadic plane, they're all relevant because they're all part of this energy. And so when we do formatting, we're looking formatting stress identification. So what we do is when we're in the monadic plane, we can check these formats to see if there's any, you know, on that really high spiritual level of our chakra, there's any of this energy is showing stress. Because the monadic plane is really a high level of high spiritual level of the chakra. Okay, it's the duality. And then below that we've got the atomic plane where you've got the forces. So atoms are made up of 1 lepton, which is the electron, and 2 baryons. And the baryon is made up of 3 quarks. The neutron is 1 up and 2 downs. The proton is 2 ups and 1 down.
Does that ever differ? Like, if you've got a neutron and a proton, do those cells ever change? Or those, like, does that always stay?
Mean?
I don't know.
Okay, so you want to understand?
Like I don't really understand it. Like, so does a neutron or a proton ever change form?
No.
Okay.
They're always like that.
Okay.
But each atom, like, say, hydrogen has 1 neutron, 1 proton, 1 electron. Helium has 2 neutrons, 2 protons, 2 electrons.
And can that ever change?
It can.
Yeah.
Sometimes, not in the lower, but in the higher, say uranium, right? You've got uranium-235 and uranium-238.
Yeah.
So 235, I think 238's the radioactive form. Is that right? Yep. So 235 has 235 neutrons, 235 protons, it's massive, and 235 electrons. 238 has 235 neutrons but 238 protons. So that's called an isotope. And so carbon's 12, you've got carbon-13 dating where you've got in carbon there's always a percentage of the carbon's atoms that have 13 protons instead of 12. But they decay over time, and that's how they use it for dating something, by how much carbon-13's in there, or 14 or whatever it is. You know? And that's what makes uranium-238 radioactive, is the fact that it's got 3 extra protons in, and so it's easier to split the atom. So when you split the atom, the energy that's given off is the weak force being broken. Actually. And because you get a chain reaction, you get a massive, this is a lot of energy, a massive explosion. And yeah.
Hugo, is the reason we're dealing with this is because from heart chakra up we're dealing more high spiritual?
Oh no, this is relevant in all the chakras. I'm just introducing it now. I didn't want to give you too many new concepts at once, because I found if I give everyone too many new concepts at once, there's a higher chance of people being confused. So I try to give it like bit by bit. You
To
know, that's what I've
confuse us
learned
to
over
go along.
time, is to introduce things. If I can introduce one thing at a time, people learn it and pick it up better. So you can use it in all the chakras, and indeed when you go to explore the planes, it says monadic plane under the Hugo, it says lepton and quark formats, page blah blah. Okay, and if it's atmic plane, it's the force formats, page blah blah. I'm just giving it to you now so you can start introducing it if it shows in your practice. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay, that's okay. I'll come and explain it again when it's appropriate. But let's go through and finish this. I'll show you the formats, then I'll show you where you use it, okay? So the force. So in physics, I love this. In physics, my brother's a physicist, you know. There's 4 recognised forces. The electromagnetic force, the strong and the weak force, which I've just showed you, and the gravitational force, which they actually haven't properly measured yet, because each force has a carrier particle, and they've measured the electromagnetic force, which is a photon, which, you know, just the sun releases photons. We've got the strong force, which is called a gluon, they've measured. The weak force is called a boson, which they've measured. And the gravitation is the hypothetical carrier particles called the gravitron. Gravitron, yeah. They haven't measured that yet. Graviton, yeah. Anyway, getting back to this, then, you know, to me, I was like, well, this is not enough. I recognised, you know, I always thought there must be 3 other forces of yoga, and then I found it in one of the books I have. They're upstairs now. And that is Kundalini, and this is actually, Kundalini travels up Sushumna. So then I propose that there's a carrier particle for Kundalini called the Kundalon, and the vital force, which is actually prana, which I propose pranon. And then the mental force, which we would call, obviously, a mentalon. I think that's fun. But when I saw that, I thought, of course, so that makes 7 forces. And I'm like, yeah. Okay, so this shows you the subatomic particles. So the nucleus is green, and you can see the neutron is yellow with 2 downs and an up, and the proton is pink with 2 ups and a down. And you can see how you've got the strong forces here holding them together and the weak force holding them there. And this is what it looks like. That's so fun. I love it.
So here you go. Sorry to bring this up again. So that cannot change.
No,
Okay.
it can't change.
So up can't turn to a down.
No.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Because it's like, well, can a phone turn to this?
Yeah. Yeah. I just didn't know whether the cells could be like manipulated.
No, they're particles. They're the smallest known pieces of particle.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, kind of. Well, they found the Higgs boson, which is supposedly underneath them all, but, you know. And then you've got string theory, which is another way of saying that basically matter's vibration, just vibrating in a different way. So. I asked my brother about it, because he's just in town. And I said, what's this with the Higgs boson? And he said, oh yeah, they found it. And then he didn't say much, and I sort of and he says, but it's not behaving how they expected. So it's raised more questions than answers. So now they're finding all this other stuff that they didn't realise. So if it behaved as expected, well, then they would all be very happy. But since when have you met anyone that behaves as expected? Not particularly anybody.
Peter, could you go 2 slides back to the nucleus picture?
And that this is the electromagnetic force. So then you've got energy mass mode like this. So energy mass mode, and then you've got, and these are on paper pages. It's on these are the these are the quarks. Quarks.
11 and 12.
Page of the quarks are 11.
Yeah.
Okay. So you, if you're on the monadic plane, in other words, if the first reference is pericardium and triple eta, you've got, these are all the formats. And you can see on the left the secondary reference. So whatever the second reference is, you can read across and see the, you know, for instance, if the, say if you've got, say for example, we do, the object is, we're doing heart chakra, so liver, right? So it's yin aspect of the heart chakra. First reference is pericardium, which tells us it's the monadic plane. And the second reference is large intestine, for example. So when we get to the explore planes on the page, which in your manual would be page 95? Yep, on page 95. So you can see when it says explore plane, because you're on the monadic plane, if you look under the Hugo column, it says energy to love and accept, lepton and quark formats on page 11 and 12. So you would go to this, and the second reference was large intestine, so if it's the U quark, which is energy mass mode plus large intestine light touch. Okay? So it's just showing you a format to use. And if it's, or you could come to this one, large intestine is the muon, energy mass mode plus large intestine deep touch. So if you're on the monadic plane, when you go to these, you just put the energy mass mode and the alarm point of the secondary reference, light touch or deep touch. That's all you do. Does that make sense?
So you're doing that for each, or just
Yeah, only if you're on the monadic plane.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go to, let's do an example.
Only if you were testing or on point.
Okay, so I'm balancing the heart chakra, right? And the object was liver deep touch, reference pericardium, second ref was large intestine. So I go through my balance, and when I get to the explore planes, it's telling me I have to use the lepton and quark formats. Okay? And so if I go to page 11 and 12, page 11 is the quark formats. So if you look down, you've looked down the table, it says secondary reference. Here the secondary reference is large intestine. So you just read across that. That's all you put in. Does that make sense?
Is it always going to be that alarm point? So our second was liver, so it's always going to be liver alarm point, just holding it home.
Yeah, it's whatever is the last coordinate, basically. And the first reference has to be either pericardium or triple eta to be monadic plane. Yeah? And only if it's the monadic plane do you use this. So if this was like gallbladder, for example, then you wouldn't be using these. And so you know you're in the monadic plane, and the box tells you use these formats. Tells you to go there. And then you go there and you just use the alarm point of the third coordinate or the second reference. That's all. It's actually not, you know, I know it might be a little confusing with the table and all this quark and stuff like this, but actually in practice, it's you just hold the mode and test the alarm point, light touch and deep touch.
And then balance it.
Well, then you just de-stress it like any other format. It's just saying that on the monadic plane that we've got this energy of quarks as the imbalance. That's all it is.
So the difference just there when you mentioned light or deep, the deep touch is actually electron and the light touch is quark.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
What was that?
So whatever it is, you just stack it in and then
De-stress
out,
it and keep going.
Yeah.
If we got a severe.
And you're just looking, because one or both of them or none of them, so none of them could show, one of them could show, or both of them could show. You're just testing it to see if there's stress like any other format. Remember, formats are there to identify and reveal stress to you. We put them in the circuit, the stress is revealed. If it's not revealed, we just keep going. Once it's revealed, we then de-stress it with whatever method and keep going.
So once we get to the first reference being in the pericardium heater, and the second reference on these.
Yeah, well, whatever it was. Remember,
So
in
large
the initial
intestine is what
part,
you go to.
huh?
Sorry, is the large intestine what you would go to on this?
If the third coordinate was large intestine.
Yeah.
If it was,
Yeah,
I don't know, heart, you would do the
the
heart,
heart one. Okay.
It's whatever it says that secondary reference there.
Yeah.
See the column that says secondary reference? So whatever your secondary reference was, you go on that line.
Is that, I'm just imagining that this, what we're identifying here is a disruption of the subatomic particles that are then causal all the way through the other planes, right down into the etheric and physical body.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Well, if you're working in the
far up the tree.
yeah, well, if you're working on the monadic plane, you're working far up the tree.
Yeah.
I mean, when I work, I mean, it's not very often that I get, going up into that level because it's really a high spiritual level.
And
Okay.
that's because people are still in that free.
Well, usually it's their mental, emotional crap you're dealing with, isn't it?
Yeah, that space chakra stuff.
Oh well, it can be any chakra, but
Yeah.
it's just the plane that you're working on.
Is that a disruption that has worked its way
Well, you're just showing
up
where the
or down?
oh, I don't know. It's just there's a disruption or a stress. You can't say it's worked up or worked down. It's just there. There's an imbalance on that level of the chakra. On the monadic plane. That's what we're saying. We're revealing an imbalance or where there's stress on that level of the chakra. This is helping you go a little bit deeper into that to reveal more of the stress that we can de-stress and help so they can find their healing space.
Given that our chakras were like those transponders from energy outside to more to our physical, is a disruption at that level going to obviously affect the energy either coming in or going out?
Well, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, they all affect it. I mean, we're looking, if you've got a balance up here, energy comes down, it creates imbalances all the way down, doesn't it? Until it manifests as a physical imbalance, if it's been there long enough.